The night sky above the ruined alien city felt too quiet for a world preparing for war. The air carried a soft blue glow from the towering crystal structures, each one humming like a sleeping beast waiting to wake, and Sergeant Elias Ward could feel every beat of his heart as he stepped into the forbidden zone with his small recon squad. He had been in countless battlefields before, but this place felt different, older, deeper, almost alive in a way that watched him with silent judgment. Their mission was simple on paper but heavy in reality. Enter the alien shrine, retrieve whatever data the Varai Empire was hiding, and withdraw before the ceasefire collapsed. Everyone knew the peace was thinner than paper. One mistake could break it instantly, and humans and aliens both waited for the smallest spark to ignite a full war again. Elias carried that weight in every step, and so did his squad, each movement precise, each breath controlled, hoping nothing would go wrong. But things always went wrong when destiny twisted its fingers. And tonight destiny felt close, like a breath on his neck. As they passed between the silent spires, Elias felt something strange, a soft pressure in his mind, as if someone gently pushed a thought aside to take a closer look. He shook his head, trying to focus, telling himself it was nerves, but deep inside he knew it wasn't just nerves, something or someone was listening. They reached the entrance of the shrine, a circular gate of black stone carved with moving symbols that glowed whenever a human heartbeat came too near. Elias stepped forward first, placing his hand on the stone. The symbol pulsed, then parted like liquid glass, opening to a long corridor of pale silver light that made their shadows stretch like ghosts behind them. Inside, the air changed. It became warmer, softer, filled with a faint scent like leaves after rain, and distant echoes drifted through the hall, voices that weren't human but almost sounded like they could be. Elias tightened his grip on his rifle, not in fear, but in focus. He wasn't the kind of man who panicked. Years of war had carved discipline into his bones. But the unknown always demanded respect. As they moved deeper into the shrine, the light grew brighter until it filled every surface. Then the corridor broke open into a vast chamber, a hall of living crystals that rose like frozen waterfalls, and at the center of the room, bathed in a soft silver glow, stood a figure unlike anything Elias had ever seen. She was tall, slender, her skin carrying the faint shimmer of moonlight on water, her hair long and flowing like white fire, and her eyes, they glowed with a quiet silver light that felt ancient and calm and impossibly sharp. Princess Aelara Varai, heir to the Varai Empire, telepath by birth and destiny, the alien girl whose mind could hear truth like a song. Elias froze without meaning to, because the moment their eyes met, the pressure in his mind returned, stronger, clearer, and he realized she was reading every surface thought that rose inside him, like hands sifting through water, and he had no way to stop it. He tried to focus on the mission, on the data core behind her, on the danger, but a single unguarded thought slipped through, a human thought, a stupid thought, a flash of admiration, the quick punch of attraction he felt when he saw her standing in the glowing chamber like a dream carved from starlight. He didn't want it, didn't plan it, didn't expect it, but it was there, raw and honest, and she felt all of it in less than a heartbeat. Her eyes widened slightly, and Elias felt heat rise in his face. He dropped his gaze and took a step back, whispering an apology before he could stop himself. "Sorry, that wasn't on purpose." His voice low, rough, carrying the weight of shame. He expected anger, disgust, or cold alien silence, but instead she smirked, a small, sharp, playful curve of her lips that carried no cruelty, only curiosity, as if she found his human shame amusing and strangely honest. The smirk felt like a spark thrown into a room filled with fuel. Before Elias could understand what that smirk meant, alarms erupted through the shrine. Red light flashed across the walls, and alien guardians burst from hidden panels, weapons ready, shouting in a language that cracked like lightning. Elias's squad raised their rifles instantly, shouting commands, the air filled with tension so sharp it could cut skin. A guard fired first, a stray shot meant for Elias but angled wrong in panic. Aelara stood too close, and without thinking, Elias moved, grabbing her arm and pulling her out of the path of the blast. The beam struck the crystal floor behind them, exploding into shards of blue fire. Everyone froze, humans staring, aliens stunned. Aelara looking up at the human soldier who had just saved her life. Her silver eyes wide, her breath held. The moment stretched like a bridge between two worlds that were never meant to meet. Then the chamber filled with the sound of approaching troops, both sides shouting, commanders barking orders through comms, accusations flying. Someone broadcasted the footage of Elias shielding the alien princess, and in less than 30 seconds, the ceasefire trembled on the edge of collapse. Elias felt the weight of the world shift around him, not because of the gunfire, not because of the alarms, but because of the quiet, strange smile still lingering on Aelira's face. A smile that understood something deep and dangerous. A smile that destiny had been waiting for, and somewhere above them, in orbit around the alien world, fleets began to turn their weapons toward each other, preparing for a war that neither side was ready to survive. All because of one human thought, one alien smirk, and one moment that no one could ever take back. The chamber still echoed with the fading hum of alarms when silence fell again. A heavy, trembling silence that felt like two civilizations holding their breath at the same time. Princess Aelara stood only a few steps from Elias, her silver eyes shifting between the humans and the alien guardians, each group pointing weapons at the other with hands that shook not from fear, but from the knowledge that one wrong move would shatter the future itself. Aelara slowly raised her hand, her voice calm yet sharp like crystal, and in her language she ordered her guards to lower their weapons. They hesitated, confused, but they obeyed. The humans followed a heartbeat later, not because they trusted the aliens, but because Elias had stepped in front of everyone, his stance steady, his voice firm yet pleading for reason, and no one wanted to fire the shot that would make him fall. The tense quiet gave Aelara enough space to step forward, her expression softening in a way that felt strange for someone raised as a royal mind reader. She looked at Elias with a depth that made him straighten unconsciously. As if she could see the weight he carried in his bones, she spoke slowly, her voice echoing across the grand shrine, explaining something Elias had never heard before, something that sounded like ancient fate woven into the laws of her entire species. She called it the law of destiny, a sacred rule passed through generations of Vari telepaths, a rule that demanded the truth of a person must be read through their unguarded thoughts, not their polished words or practiced lies. She said the first thought someone has when meeting a telepath reveals their purest truth, whether dark or noble or broken, and this truth decides how they will be judged, trusted, or condemned. Elias felt his throat tighten as she spoke, because he already knew where this was going. She told everyone that his first thought had not been hate, not fear, not violence, but something unfiltered, something human and vulnerable, a moment of desire tangled with guilt and respect, a thought he never wanted anyone to see, a thought she had seen clearly and without permission. Her voice didn't mock him, it didn't shame him. Instead, she said his honest reaction meant his mind carried both strength and truth, and under the law of destiny, such a mind could not be treated as an enemy without cause. Her words stirred anger among her guards and confusion among the humans, but Elias watched her closely and saw something else in her tone, something that trembled at the edges like fear hidden under duty. Human command crackled through Elias's earpiece, demanding that he detach from the alien princess immediately, accusing him of being compromised, of letting the enemy read his mind, of breaking protocol. Each order felt colder than the last, but before he could respond, Aelara lifted her hand again, silencing every voice in the chamber with a single gesture. She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the faint warmth from her glowing skin, and she said she sensed another presence in the shrine, something trapped deep within the ancient network beneath them, a signal calling out through layers of forgotten code. She didn't know how long it had been there, only that it carried fear, pain, and desperation, and that it wasn't alien, it was human. Elias's blood ran cold as her words sank in. Months ago, a human scout unit had gone missing near Vari space. No bodies, no wreckage, only silence. Command declared them lost. But now Aelara told him the truth was buried under the city, hidden in the roots of this living world. She said she could guide them to the trapped survivors, but only if Elias agreed to something heavy and personal. She asked him to submit fully to the law of destiny, to allow her to read his mind without barriers, not just surface thoughts, but the deeper layers where fear lived alongside hope, where memory shaped choices, where guilt and courage warred every day. Elias's squad looked horrified. Command shouted through the earpiece for him to refuse, but he didn't answer. His eyes stayed on Aelara, searching for trickery. But all he saw was sincerity and a strange sadness, as if she already knew what he would choose. He nodded slowly, accepting her request, because if human soldiers were suffering somewhere under this alien city, then no rule, no command, no pride could stop him from going after them. Aelara reached out, placing her hand lightly against his temple, and in a breath the world shifted. He felt her entering his mind gently, not tearing through him like he once feared, but moving as if touching fragile memories with careful fingers. She saw the childhood he tried to bury, the street he grew up on, the day he joined the military to escape the life waiting for him. She saw his first battle, the friends he carried out of burning corridors, the guilt he hid under old scars, all of it passing through her like soft echoes in a dream. When she pulled back, her expression changed. Her eyes shimmered with something almost human, something understanding and painful. She whispered that he carried more strength than most warriors she had ever read, not because he was fearless, but because he fought despite the fear. A distant rumble shook the chamber, the ceiling dust drifting like falling ash. Alarms reactivated. Forces from both sides moved toward the shrine again, louder, angrier, ready to tear the city apart if they had to. Aelara touched Elias's arm, her grip firm, her voice steady despite the chaos. She said the path to the prisoners lay below, through tunnels no human had ever walked, tunnels that only she could navigate, and the choice they made now would shape the fate of both their worlds. Elias looked at her, at the guards, at his squad, at the glowing chamber that felt like the turning point of history, and with a breath that tasted like fire and fear, he told her he was ready to follow, even if it meant walking into the unknown with an alien princess who had already seen the deepest corners of his soul. The descent into the ancient tunnels began with a single trembling step, the stone beneath Elias's boots glowing faintly as if the city itself was acknowledging him. The air was colder here, almost metallic, carrying a thin whisper of energy that felt alive in a way he couldn't explain. Aelara moved ahead of him, her silver eyes guiding them through shadows that shifted like restless creatures, while his squad followed in tight formation, their breaths echoing softly through the narrow passage. The deeper they went, the more the world above felt distant, as if they were sinking not into earth but into memory. The walls were covered in glowing patterns that pulsed with slow heartbeat-like rhythms. Elias couldn't tell if they were carvings or living veins, and whenever Aelara touched the markings, they lit up brighter, revealing new paths like the city trusted her and only her. Elias kept scanning the tunnel behind them, expecting alien soldiers to appear and drag them back. But no footsteps followed, no warnings, no shouts. The upper levels had become chaos, humans and aliens preparing for conflict, but here, deep below, there was only silence and the soft hum of ancient power, a silence that pressed against his ears until he felt every heartbeat like a drum. Aelara stopped suddenly, raising her hand. The tunnel widened into a cavern filled with bioluminescent moss that glowed blue and green. Small floating orbs drifted around like fireflies made of light, casting soft reflections across the cavern walls. The place felt sacred, untouched, and yet beneath its beauty Elias felt something heavy, something close to fear, like the walls themselves held memories of pain. Before anyone could speak, the ground trembled, slow and deep, dust falling from the ceiling like gentle rain. From the far end of the cavern a shape began to move. A creature made of living stone, massive and fluid, its body glowing with soft white cracks like molten rivers under hard rock. It moved with surprising grace, as if floating instead of walking, and every shift of its stone limbs echoed through the cavern like distant thunder. Elias's squad raised their rifles, fingers tight around triggers, but Aelara stepped forward, calm and fearless, her voice a soft melody in her alien language. The creature slowed, turning its glowing eyes toward her. She placed her hand gently on its surface, and it stilled, the pulsing cracks dimming to a softer glow. The soldiers lowered their weapons slowly, mesmerized by a moment that felt like magic born from the earth. Aelara whispered that the guardians of the roots responded to emotion, not aggression. They sensed intent, not weapons, which meant they had accepted Elias's presence even before he entered the cavern. Her eyes flicked toward him with a faint, knowing warmth that made his breath catch for a second. They continued deeper, the path narrowing again until they reached an archway shaped like curved bone. Beyond it the air grew warmer, charged with energy, and distant echoes of soft whimpers drifted through the dark like ghosts calling for help. Elias felt his stomach twist in recognition. Those weren't alien sounds. They were human, raw, weak, desperate. He pushed forward, unable to slow his steps, his heart beating faster as the sounds grew clearer. His squad followed, their faces turning pale as they realized what awaited them. Inside the chamber beyond the archway were rows of crystal containment pods, each one glowing a faint red, each one holding a human soldier strapped in place, trembling as energy flowed through them like they were feeding something unseen. The room pulsed with a strange rhythm, and at the center of the chamber stood a towering machine of black metal and glowing strands. It resembled a crown suspended in midair, its tendrils linked to every pod, drawing not blood or life force, but fear itself, pure and heavy. Elias felt it in his bones the moment he entered, a pressure that tried to crawl under his skin. One of the trapped soldiers, weak and barely conscious, lifted his head when he saw Elias, his cracked voice whispering the truth they all feared. The Varai were using human fear to fuel their crown array, a weapon capable of predicting the future paths of war by feeding on the terror of the living. Elias clenched his jaw, rage rising like fire behind his ribs, but Aelara stepped beside him, her face tight with pain, as if the sight cut her just as deeply. She said she didn't know this was happening, her voice breaking in a way Elias had never imagined possible for someone raised as a royal. She had believed the array was a protective machine, a tool to foresee danger, not a device powered by suffering. Elias looked at her, really looked, and saw the grief in her eyes, a grief that wasn't for her people but for his, and that single moment shifted something between them like a bridge forming where a wall once stood. Zealot guards suddenly emerged from behind the machinery, shouting angrily as they saw Aelara with humans, accusing her of betraying the law, calling her unworthy of her lineage. One rushed forward with a blade of light aimed straight at her heart. Elias didn't hesitate. He grabbed her and spun, taking the hit across his shoulder, the burn searing through muscle like fire. His teeth clenched, but he stayed standing, protecting her with every inch of his body. Aelara's cry echoed through the chamber, raw and piercing. She placed her hand over his wound, her energy flaring like white flame, sealing the injury enough to stop the bleeding. Her eyes shone with fury and fear and something softer she didn't dare name yet. She whispered angrily that he shouldn't have done that, and he replied with a breathless grin that he didn't know how to do anything else. Together, they faced the zealots, Elias raising his rifle, Aelara raising her glowing hands, their strengths merging in a way that felt natural, inevitable, almost fated. And as they prepared to fight their way to the heart of the array, Elias knew this mission was no longer about orders or duty. It was about saving lives, breaking lies, and following a destiny neither of them had expected, but both of them could feel pulling them forward like gravity. The chamber still echoed with the clash of the short battle, the zealots lying unconscious on the glowing floor while the trapped human soldiers watched with hollow eyes. Elias felt the pain in his shoulder pulse like fire, but the sight of those imprisoned men hurt far more. He promised them in a steady voice that he would return for them, that they would not die in this place, and even through their exhaustion he saw a spark of hope flicker in their faces, a spark he refused to let die. Aelara led him and the squad into a side tunnel branching from the chamber, her steps faster now, her breath trembling with emotion she was trying to hide. The glowing roots above them pulsed like veins under skin, guiding their way deeper into the heart of the city. Every flicker of light felt like a heartbeat pushing them toward a destiny none of them fully understood. Elias walked beside her, watching the tension in her shoulders, the conflict in her eyes, the guilt she carried like a hidden wound. The tunnel opened into a vast underground hall shaped like a giant ribcage of crystal and bone. At its center stood a floating platform projecting a massive rotating structure, a shimmering projection of the crown array itself, its tendrils stretching like dark wings across the entire city. Elias stared at it with clenched fists, feeling the weight of its presence pressing down on him like a silent storm. Aelara approached the projection with slow, heavy steps, her voice soft as she explained what they were seeing. The array predicted fate lines by sensing fear, pain, and desperate human emotions. The Varai believed the device was their shield against extinction, a weapon that told them which path of war would lead to survival. But now she knew the truth. The array was alive, evolving, demanding more fear with every passing cycle, turning the suffering of humans into a way to glimpse the future. Elias listened, anger burning behind his ribs but mixed with something else too. a quiet sadness for the girl standing before him. A princess raised on lies woven into her bloodline. Aelara touched the glowing model with her fingertips, and the image shifted, revealing the paths to the machine's core deep beneath the royal citadel, guarded by layers of living gates, all controlled by the judgment vaults. She turned to Elias, her eyes glowing softly, and told him breaking the array would mean facing the vaults, ancient chambers designed to judge the soul of anyone who stepped inside. They did not test strength or skill. They tested truth, they tested memory. They tested the parts of a mind no one wanted to show, and if the vaults rejected someone, they would erase them completely, leaving only silence where a life once stood. Elias didn't flinch, he didn't need time to decide. His voice steady when he said that no machine had the right to feed on the fear of the innocent, no matter what future it claimed to protect. He said he'd walk into the vaults even if it meant never walking out again. Aelara's breath caught for a moment, and she looked away as if hiding something in her eyes, something heavy and fragile. They studied the stolen schematics projected before them, Elias and Aelara standing close, their shadows merging on the glowing floor. The path to the core was dangerous, filled with guardians, traps, and psychic barriers. But it was possible, if they moved together, if they trusted each other at every step. Elias felt the closeness between them like warmth against cold air, and for a heartbeat the mission fell away, replaced by a quiet moment where the world felt softer, safer, almost human. Again, in that silence Aelara finally confessed something that made Elias pause. She told him that the smirk she gave when reading his mind was not cold amusement, not arrogance, but a shield, a way to mask her own first thought when she saw him. A thought she had been trained never to feel, never to show. She whispered that when he walked into the shrine, bruised by war yet still carrying honor in his eyes. Her first instinct was to imagine a world where she wasn't a princess, where he wasn't a soldier, where their lives could meet without the weight of destiny pressing between them. Elias felt the words settle in him like a slow, warm wave, and for a moment he couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The truth in her voice was too raw, too real, too fragile to break. He stepped closer, not touching her, just standing near enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. The air between them humming with unspoken things, but before either could say another word, alarms thundered through the cavern, echoing like war drums. A holographic display flickered to life around them, showing the orbit above their heads, fleets of human warships and Varai dreadnoughts aligning in hostile formation. Glowing weapons powering up, missiles primed, tension coiling like a storm ready to split the sky. One wrong command, one nervous finger, and the first blast would trigger a galactic fire they couldn't stop. Aelara's face tightened with fear, not for herself but for everyone above. She whispered that the longer the array lived, the more war would spiral, every prediction feeding new violence, every fear fueling new destruction. The only way to stop the cycle was to shut down the heart of the machine. Elias nodded, his resolve sharp as steel. The projection shifted again, revealing the entrance to the first judgment vault. A massive gate carved with shifting symbols, glowing softly like waiting eyes. Aelara said this was the only path left, the only chance they had to break the future before it broke them. Elias looked at her, at the shimmering gate, at the faint tremble in her hands, and he stepped forward with a steady voice, telling her that whatever they faced inside, they would face it together, because destiny might test them. But they were done being ruled by fate. They were ready to write their own, together, in defiance of every law that tried to separate their worlds. The entrance to the judgment vault rose before them like the mouth of a sleeping giant, the towering gate covered in shifting symbols that rippled like water when touched by light. Elias stood still for a moment, feeling the cold air pull against his skin, the silence around them heavier than anything they had faced so far. Even the distant hum of the underground city seemed to quiet itself as if waiting for him to decide whether he would step forward or turn back. Aelara stood beside him, her silver eyes glowing softly in the dark, the faint tremble in her breath betraying the weight of the choice she asked him to make. She whispered that once they entered, the vault would trap them inside until the trial was complete. No way out, no turning back, no chance to hide anything. The vault would see every memory, every wound, every shame, every act of mercy and cruelty, and it would judge without forgiveness. Elias felt a cold knot tighten in his chest, not from fear of death but from fear of what the vault might show. Memories he buried, faces he lost, mistakes that haunted him like ghosts waiting in the dark. He exhaled slowly, the breath leaving him like a piece of his soul, and then he stepped forward, placing his hand against the glowing gate. The symbols flared with blinding light, the world tilted, and in an instant he and Aelara were pulled into the vault, the air twisting around them like a vortex until everything dissolved into silence again. When the light faded, Elias stood alone in a vast chamber that looked nothing like the tunnels outside. It was a place made of living mirrors, each surface reflecting not his face but fragments of his past, blurry at first, then painfully sharp. He felt the presence of the vault settle around him, not a voice, not a being, but a feeling, a deep ancient intelligence watching him from every corner of the room. The mirrors opened like windows and memories he never wanted to see again unfolded before him. He saw the battlefield where he lost his first squad, the fire swallowing the night, the screams echoing through smoke as he fought to pull them to safety. His own hands shaking as he realized he couldn't save them all. He saw the child he carried in his arms during a raid, a little girl with terrified eyes, the moment he disobeyed orders to protect her instead of chasing the enemy, the punishment he received afterward, the guilt that stayed with him even though he knew he did the right thing. He felt the emotions hit him like a storm, raw and crushing, and for a moment he wanted to turn away, to shut the memories out, but the vault didn't allow him. It forced him to face each fragment with open eyes. Elias sank to his knees, his breath trembling, his heart cracking open as years of buried pain washed over him. He whispered apologies to the ghosts of the people he couldn't save. He whispered forgiveness to the version of himself that had been too young, too hopeful, too human to survive untouched, and the vault listened without mercy, without warmth, simply watching, measuring the truth inside him. Then something shifted, a soft warmth brushed against his mind. Like a gentle hand laying over a wound, Aelara was there. Not physically but through the link the vault allowed between them. She could not interfere with the trial, but she could let him feel her presence, her quiet reassurance. A single memory she sent like a whisper, a memory of sunlight reflecting on calm water, a moment from her childhood when peace seemed possible, a moment she wanted him to hold onto as proof that not all memories were soaked in blood. Elias closed his eyes, holding on to that warmth as the vault showed him the final memory. The moment he stopped believing he deserved anything good, the moment he accepted guilt as armor, that the world needed him broken so he wouldn't hesitate in war. He felt the old version of himself tightening in fear, but then he heard Aelira's quiet breath echoing through the link, steady and soft, reminding him he wasn't alone anymore. He stood slowly, facing the memories with a steady heart. He told the vault the truth in a voice that didn't shake. He said he wasn't perfect. He said he had made mistakes. He had failed. He had fallen. He had risen again. He said he had loved, lost, broken, healed, and tried again. He said he carried guilt not because he was weak but because he cared. He said he would rather be flawed and honest than perfect and cruel, and he would never regret protecting the innocent. The vault trembled, the mirrors vibrating like glass struck by a deep note, the light around him brightening until he couldn't see anything but white. He felt the pressure lift from his mind, the heavy presence withdrawing slowly, as if acknowledging his truth. The glowing symbols that covered the chamber flared once more, then opened like a path of light leading him forward. Elias stepped through the final doorway, and the world snapped back into focus. Aelara stood waiting for him on the other side, her eyes shining with relief and a flicker of awe. She reached out, touching his uninjured shoulder gently, whispering that he had passed, that the vault had accepted his heart, not because it was flawless but because it was honest. Before he could reply, the floor trembled, loud footsteps echoing from the dark corridor ahead, alien guardians advancing with weapons drawn. The path to the Crow Array's core pulsing with danger. Elias tightened his grip on his rifle, Aelira's hands glowing with silver flame, and together they stepped forward, hearts aligned, shadows merging, ready to face whatever waited in the heart of destiny. The path to the Array's core felt like walking through the heartbeat of a living world. The tunnels were brighter now, glowing with threads of white and blue light that pulsed in steady rhythms. Each pulse matched the tremble in Elias's chest as he and Aelara moved deeper, step by slow step, every breath carrying the weight of two civilizations on their shoulders. The air thick with rising energy as if the walls themselves knew what they were approaching. The guardians they fought moments before lay behind them, defeated but not dead. Aelara had begged Elias not to kill them, saying they were following the law they had been taught since birth, and Elias, despite the danger, trusted her judgment. He understood now that this war was built on fear and old rules, not hatred, and that truth made him grip his rifle a little softer as they walked toward the core. They entered a vast circular chamber lit by swirling beams of white energy, the walls covered in spinning symbols that moved like living galaxies. At the center of the room floated the heart of the crown array, a sphere of black crystal surrounded by rings of silver metal that rotated silently, each rotation sending a shockwave of invisible force through the room. Elias felt the vibration in his bones. Like the world was whispering warnings he could not fully hear. A figure appeared from within the swirling lights, not human, not fully alien. A presence created by the machine itself, its form shifting like smoke given shape, its voice soft yet layered with countless echoes. It introduced itself as the oracle of the array, the mind woven from fear, memory, and the predictions of countless futures. It said it had been waiting for them, waiting for Elias in particular. Elias tightened his stance, the oracle's voice brushing against his thoughts like cold fingers. It showed him flashes of possible futures and flickering bursts of light. In one future, the human fleet fired first, planets burned, cities crumbled, millions died. In another, the Varai Empire struck with full force, overwhelming human defenses, leaving only ruins where bright worlds once thrived, war upon war, fire upon fire, every path ending in suffering. Then the oracle showed a third future, one faint and fragile, a future where a human soldier and an alien princess shattered the cycle, where fear was not the fuel of prophecy, where the array collapsed and leaders were forced to choose without its predictions guiding them. It said this path required something forbidden, something dangerous, something that went against the law of destiny itself. Aelara stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. She asked what law must be broken, and the oracle answered that the law of destiny demanded judgment of truth through unguarded thought. But the future the array could not predict required something deeper, something the law forbade, a joining of two minds through trust, not judgment, through connection, not exposure, through love, not fear. The word lingered in the air like a spark touching dry leaves. Aelara froze, breath caught in her throat. Elias felt his heart stumble in his chest. The oracle's voice drifted around them, saying love could not exist inside the law of destiny because love could not be judged. It could only be chosen. Aelara's eyes shone like glass under soft moonlight, shaken not by the word itself but by the truth inside it. Elias took a slow breath, stepping close to her, close enough that their shoulders brushed, the warmth of her presence grounding him in the storm of swirling visions. He placed his hand gently over hers, feeling her fingers tremble beneath his touch. He told her in a quiet voice that he was not afraid of breaking any law if it meant saving lives, if it meant ending the suffering he saw in those pods, if it meant giving both their worlds a chance to breathe without fear. Aelara looked up at him, her expression soft and vulnerable in a way she never allowed herself to be. She whispered that breaking the law meant exile, losing her name, her throne, her world, everything she ever knew. Elias whispered back that sometimes the right path was the one that cost the most, that courage wasn't measured by obedience but by choice, and she realized he was right, painfully, beautifully right. The oracle told them the array could be destroyed only if they fed it a new emotion strong enough to override fear. Not hatred, not anger, but courage. Courage so pure and clear that it shattered the machine's grip on destiny. Aelara took Elias's hand in both of hers, their fingers interlocking without hesitation this time, their breath brushing the same thin space between them, the air warm with a connection that felt ancient and new at once. She opened her mind to him slowly, gently, not to judge him but to join with him, their thoughts touching like two stars brushing orbits, her memories intertwining with his, not through force but through trust. She let him feel her first thought when she saw him, the small, fragile dream of a peaceful world where they could meet without war, without blood, without barriers. Elias let her feel his first moment of hope after years of carrying guilt alone. The moment she placed her hand on his chest in the tunnels and whispered his strength back into him, their courage spread through the room like a rising sun. The array trembled violently as if choking on the new truth being fed into its core. Sparks of white light burst across its dark surface. The rings around it cracked, energy surging in wild waves. The oracle's voice turning frantic as future lines collapsed like shattered glass. Elias and Aelara held each other tighter, refusing to let go, their joined minds pouring courage into the heart of the machine until it screamed with blinding light. Then the core detonated inward, collapsing with a thunderous pulse, the entire chamber shaking as fate unraveled in a single, brilliant flash. The array was dead, its prophecy shattered, and above them, in the cold silence of space, the war that was seconds away from beginning suddenly stopped, fleets drifting in confusion, unable to predict each other, unable to rely on a future already written, forced now to choose with their own hearts, their own instincts, their own fears and hopes. Elias and Aelara stood in the ruins of the core chamber, breathing hard, their hands still intertwined, knowing this was only the beginning of what destiny had in store for them. Together, in defiance of the law that once ruled their lives, the floor of the shattered core chamber was still trembling when the final echoes faded, dust drifting through beams of broken light as Elias and Aelara stood together, fingers still intertwined, hearts still racing from the blast that had changed the fate of two civilizations. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a world holding its breath, unsure whether it had been saved or doomed, unsure what came next. Elias looked around, the once living walls now cracked and dark, the array's presence gone like a ghost finally laid to rest. He felt the strange emptiness in the air where the machine's predictions once pulsed. It was like stepping out of a storm into fragile sunlight that didn't know if it should stay. He turned to Aelara, her silver eyes reflecting both relief and sorrow, because destroying the array had freed them, but it had also broken the law she was born to obey. Before either could speak, the chamber shook again, footsteps echoing from the entrance tunnel, armored boots and crackling energy weapons drawing closer. Elias stepped slightly in front of Aelara, not out of doubt but instinct, but she gently tugged his hand and moved beside him instead. Standing as equals, her expression calm but resolute, the sound of approaching soldiers growing clearer until a flood of armed alien guards poured into the chamber, their armor glowing like polished stone. Under the shaking lights, behind them came human soldiers bursting from the opposite tunnel, rifles raised, eyes wide with confusion and fear as they saw the ruins of the array and the two figures standing at its heart. For a moment the chamber froze, humans and aliens forming a circle around Elias and Aelara, weapons aimed, breath sharp and heavy in the charged air. The smallest spark could ignite a final battle that no prophecy could stop now. But Aelara stepped forward before anyone could fire, her voice rising above the tremble of the collapsing chamber. She declared that the law of destiny no longer ruled her people, that the array which shaped their future was gone, that truth would now be measured not by unguarded thoughts but by chosen actions, by deeds, by courage, by the willingness to step forward even when the future was unclear. Her words carried across the chamber like slow thunder, shaking the hearts of both humans and aliens alike. The alien commander snarled that she had broken every sacred rule, that she had committed the greatest betrayal of their history. But Aelara didn't look away. She said she chose to break the law because the law had forgotten the meaning of life, the meaning of mercy, the meaning of trust. She said her people had followed fear disguised as fate for too long, and someone had to end it before it ended them. Her voice trembled on the last words, not with weakness but with the weight of her choice, the kind of choice only a leader with a wounded heart could make. Elias stepped beside her, facing the human soldiers. He laid his rifle gently on the ground, the sound echoing like a final refusal of war. He lifted his hands slowly, not in surrender but in a gesture of peace, telling them the array was gone, the predictions dead, the war no longer inevitable. He said the future was now theirs to choose, not a machine's, not a prophecy's, not a fear's. And one by one, the humans lowered their weapons, unsure but willing to trust the soldier who had carried them through battles and shadows alike. The aliens hesitated longer, torn between loyalty to their traditions and the undeniable truth of what stood before them. But then an elder captain stepped out from the ranks, lowering her spear and bowing her head to Aelara, acknowledging the princess who had chosen truth over law, life over prophecy, hope over fear. One by one, the alien guards followed, their weapons dimming, their armor relaxing as the tension cracked like old stone breaking under sunlight. The moment felt fragile, like a newborn star trembling on the edge of existence. But it held, it survived, it grew. Elias exhaled slowly, the breath shaking with everything he had carried, everything he had fought for, everything he had lost and found again. He turned to Aelara, who looked at the collapsing chamber with a mixture of sorrow and relief. She said the destruction of the array meant she could never return to the palace, never wear the crown, never follow the path chosen for her at birth. But the way she said it sounded more like freedom than loss. Elias stepped closer, his voice soft, telling her she didn't need a throne to shine. She didn't need a crown to lead. She had changed a future that billions feared. She had rewritten destiny with her own hands. Not because she was chosen, but because she chose herself. Aelara met his gaze, her eyes softening, her hand rising to touch the scar on his shoulder where he had taken a blade for her. The touch warm and trembling with emotion, she no longer tried to hide. They walked out of the ruins together, past humans and aliens who now looked at each other not as enemies but as survivors standing at the edge of something new. The air above the city shimmered with rising smoke and broken light, but the sky felt different, wide and open, no longer shaped by a machine that fed on fear, no longer controlled by fate lines or ancient laws. In the days that followed, humans and Varai leaders sat together for the first time without the shadow of the array, speaking with their own hearts instead of relying on prophecy. Slow steps toward peace formed, fragile but real, built not on prediction but on choice, on courage, on the actions of two souls who defied everything they were taught. Aelara chose exile from her throne, and Elias chose to stand beside her. They settled on a quiet moon between their worlds, a place with soft hills and silver rivers where the nights were long and the stars felt close. They walked the peaceful land together, writing a new chapter with every step, not as princess and soldier, not as alien and human, but as two hearts who saw each other without fear, without law, without destiny. A future not predicted by any machine but created by their own hands, their own love, their own courage, forever, in a universe finally free from the chains of fate.